Okay, let's see. Let's look at tonight. We're going to wrap up our study in First Corinthians, and okay, this is the last part of First Corinthians. Last chapter is chapter 16. All right. Next week we will take a break, and then we'll come back with the history, a history of the church, and I'm still trying to work out how to do it. And problem is that too much material, so have to decide what to then teach and what to share, what to show, and to be a bit focused on that. Okay. All right. Anyway, next week we will take a week break. Then we'll come back and do history of the church. There's no request for any other book and to study other than history, so we'll just do that and see what happens. All right. All right, after dealing with the resurrection, Paul about to wrap up his letter verse 16, chapter 16, and he begins with now concerning the collection for the Lord's people. And evidently, when you see this phrase now about, and it probably is a response to the letter that that they wrote to Paul, some question information, and so this doesn't seem to be any real problem as to this, although it became a problem subsequently, and maybe it was really a problem. Maybe that's why they asked about this. Now about the collection for the Lord's people. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you is to set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. If it seems advisable for me to go, also they will accompany me. Probably a lot of the pastors, modern pastors today, take this passage as to do about collection of tithes and offerings on Sunday when they come together. But actually, this has nothing to do really with regular collection that we do in churches. Okay, this is reference the collection for the Lord's people, collection for the saints. Paul is referring to a special collection that he's doing, and for the poor believers and in Jerusalem. So you find that in verse 3, and there is your gift to Jerusalem. Okay. We don't have too much information about this, and evidently, this is something that the Corinthians already know, although they need some specific instruction. If you look at Paul's letter of Galatians, there is not much written there as well about this, and what is this then? Collection for the Lord's people. Probably in Galatians, there is a kind of a little reference there. And when Paul was let's look at Galatians chapter 1. Okay. All right. Okay, he said that. All right, after some time, and after 14 years, he went to Jerusalem with Barnabas, took Titus, and he settled the situation with Peter, and James. In verse 8, and for God, who was at work in Peter as apostle to the circumcised, that is the Jews, was also at work and in me as apostle to the Gentiles. James, Cephas, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand fellowship And when they recognized the grace given to me, they agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. All they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I've been eager to do all along. It seems that this is an agreement, something that was broached between Paul and the leaders of the Jerusalem church, that he will then collect an offering and a collection of funds. Could be quite substantial because he is collecting through all the churches in Macedonia, in Galatia, in Achaia, the various churches that Paul planted, the Gentile churches, and to bring them to Jerusalem as a kind of a relief offering for the Christians in Jerusalem. The forward of historical context is that there was a severe famine at that time and affected the Palestinians and Christians and greatly. And in Jerusalem, and there's also the possibility of there are many who have left their adopted homeland, and they are returning Jews. They sold everything that they have. They came to Jerusalem to die, or to be buried, to die and be buried there. And some of them has no ancestral homes to go to, and they are largely quite destitute and relieving. And so there was a substantial of them became Christians. And so there was this, and there's the church in Jerusalem is providing some kind of a relief work for them. And Paul wants to do his part, and the Gentile churches do his part in sending an offering for them. There's also probably a theological and undergirding to show that the church, which is Gentile, that Paul started, and the church in Jerusalem is largely Jewish, and Paul wants this as a kind of something that he does to show the indication of Christian unity, that they care for the Gentiles, are not separate from the Jewish people. They are one in the Lord, and so they have concern with the brothers and sisters in Christ. So Paul wants to be called, and this something to be systematic, something that is done or not some kind of a rush work. And so he tells them, as he do what I told the Galatian church to do. So on the first day of every week, this is probably the first time, one of the first indications that on the first day of every week. So why on the first day of every week? Most probably that is the day of worship. And when they come, then they would set aside a sum of money that's keeping with your income. The NIV, I think, is translating this according to your income. I don't know how the ESV can translate, and let's see how the ESV translate this. Okay. First Corinthians, should have checked it earlier. And as he may prosper, okay? On the first day of the week, each of you is to put aside, is stored up as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. I think the ESV is more literal, as he may prosper, rather than according to your income. Keeping your income then is a bit, what we say, anachronistic. because many of the Christians in Jerusalem are slaves. Probably if you're a slave, you don't have an income. There's no salary, then you may be your what we call masters might give you some kind of profit sharing, then or gifts or whatever that you may have, and commissions and for work done as he prospers you. Okay, so according to income is kind of anachronistic because not everyone in the churches and the Gentile churches and would have some kind of a regular income that most people have. But I think NIV is trying to make it relevant for today. So according to your income, but I think the ESV says that according as the Lord prospers you, as he may prosper. Okay, so as the Lord blesses you, as the Lord gives you, and in keeping with that, there is no indication that this is tithing. This is a percentage. It seems that this is something that is totally voluntary, and for them to can remember and the poor. So the understanding is that so when I come, I don't have to make a collection. Okay, then when Paul visits them and says, no, we want to and give a substantial gift to the Christians and the poor Christians in Jerusalem, and start collecting them. Probably then they would have been collecting it for a couple of months or even years. So this is a kind of a collection that they have, and so if they're collecting kind of quite a substantial amount of money, well, not only one church but a number of churches. Okay, in Macedonia, that is in Philippi, in Thessalonica, then in some of the in Berea. In Galatia, probably in Asia, where Paul is, and they were collecting. Later on, we find that, and so that give to Jerusalem. Okay, all right, with the men that you approved, and so let's see, collection for the saints. Let's see in 24, 27. After several years, and he says that, and when he was talking to Felix, and after absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and present offerings. Okay, there were a number of people that that Paul has, and each church sends some representatives to safeguard what we call, and so he says that then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve. So there is some kind of accountability that you collect the offering, then the amount of money, then the silver, the gold, or the whatever coins that they have, and whatever the collection they have. I think you must note that at that time there was no such thing as checks or money or paper money, and so it's quite substantial and offering that they have to. So that I will give letters of introduction to the men that you approve, credentials, and then send them with your gift to Jerusalem. So each church, there will be probably 1 or 2 representatives, and they will represent and the gift when they come to Jerusalem and meet the Jerusalem church and present those gifts. And if it seems advisable for me to go, they will accompany me. All right. So Paul is saying that he's going to Jerusalem. So if it seems advisable, then they accompany me. I will lead them, and that seems to have caused a bit of a problem, because when they came to Jerusalem, when the temple, and when some of the extreme radical Jews saw and Paul, and then he was accompanied with some Gentile Christians, and he thought that they will bring him them into the temple, they will defile the temple, and they accused Paul of all kinds of scandals, all kinds of things, and but they were bringing gifts to the poor and in Jerusalem, and so they were giving that. So this is the kind of a collection that Paul was doing. It has nothing to see, there is nothing Paul said as to the church having some kind of a regular collection that they have for the maintenance of a church. The church has no buildings, and there are rich and Christians who will offer their homes and to what we call for meetings. There are no expenses of the church. From time to time, and Paul will accept patronage, and there will be some rich followers, disciples who will host Paul and his party, and in certain churches, then he'll become part of the household, and that allow Paul. Paul in Corinth seems to very studiously, very purposefully refuse that kind of patronage because of certain problems that he would think that he would encounter if he does that. So in some of the churches that Paul went to, especially in Corinth, he worked with his hands. So then he was a tent maker, so he worked there, and so that he would not burden the church. And of course, the church might give him offerings and all that. And but there was no such thing as a regular collection of offerings probably at this time. And so the collection that is mentioned in Corinthians is a special collection for the poor, and to ensure that there's a regular, substantial amount that will be collected finally when Paul arrives, is that each week, on the first day of the week, each year also you set aside and keeping, and as the Lord prospers you, or in keeping as what you received, and very loosely your income, okay? There's no percentage, there's no 10% tithe or things like that, and saving it up. And so that when they come, there's no collection that's made. So, and then says that when I come, I will give credentials and write letters of instruction to the men that you approve. And these are the people that were going to take the money. You'll notice that Paul doesn't take the money at all. He never handled the money, because I think he's very, very conscious that people may accuse him profiting from his ministry, and he refuses to do that. So, but if it's advisable for me to go, then they accompany me. I'll take them along and to Jerusalem, okay? But they keep the money, okay? Then after that, and when he talks about this, they're traveling to Jerusalem, then he also talked about his more immediate plans of travel. He is saying that, and I'm going to Macedonia. Macedonia is the province a bit north of Achaia, and where Corinth is the capital of Achaia. Macedonia is the northern part of Greece, and rather than the southern part of Greece, that is called Achaia, where Athens is, and so Paul says, I'm going to go through Macedonia. That means he's going to Philippi, he's going to Thessalonica, he's probably going to Berea, and maybe some of the other churches along the way. And after I go through Macedonia, and I will come to you. Perhaps I will stay for you a while, or even spend the winter, so that you can help me on my journey wherever I go. So it's uncertain that Paul is whether he's going to Jerusalem, whether he's going to Spain, or when he's going to Rome. He hasn't seemed to decided, and he can so you can help me on my way and collect some kind of a mission offering that he will have that will help him to go wherever I go. I do not want to see you now and make only a passing visit. Because he says, I hope to spend some time with you if the Lord permits. So Paul's immediate plans, and he was writing from Ephesus. He was in Asia Minor. There's Ephesus. He's writing. So I'm going over to Macedonia, and after Macedonia, and I've done whatever I need to do over there, probably in collecting the also part of the collection of the offerings and collection that he's doing that as well. Also encouraging and establishing the Christians there. Then he'll come to Corinth and he planned to stay there for a while. Okay, now that was his plan. But right now he said, I will stay on Ephesus until Pentecost because a great door for effective work has opened to me, and there are many who oppose me. Okay, so then he will stay on in Ephesus in Asia because the opportunity for evangelism has opened up. He doesn't mention, but the opportunity for to teach, to preach, and in spite of opposition. So it's very interesting to find that Paul is talking about opportunity as well as opposition. And now what happened after he's written this is probably then what's maybe reflected in Ephesus. There was an uproar, and Paul has to cut short his time in Ephesus, and he has to be bundled away, and for his safety, because and you read Acts chapter 18, there was a big what we called and the commotion. And okay, let's do Acts 18. Okay, then he went to Corinth. He then post the left synagogue, went house of house. Then he stayed in Corinth, and after a while, there's Galileo persuading him, paying Corinth for some time. Then he went to Ephesus. Okay, and okay. Meanwhile, now when Paul was Corinth, okay, Paul came to Ephesus, and this became particularly some of the Jews came and went on for extraordinary miracles, and so there were Jews, and they all kind of. So when after all this happened, and it seemed that something happened, and that Paul had to leave Ephesus kind of suddenly, and because of that, he thought that no, his original plan was to go to Macedonia and then come to Corinth, and because his stay in Ephesus was cut short, so he decided to go to Corinth and go to Macedonia and then come back. And so he thought he was going to make a quick trip. He still planned to come to Macedonia and Corinth to stay for a long time, and it was that change of itinerary that caused problems, that occasioned the kind of problems that Paul had to deal with in 2 Corinthians. And so they will say that Paul said one thing and then did another thing, and so they were accusing him of inconsistency or did not be true to his word. They were surprised when Paul turned up suddenly. But that is a further story that you'll read in 2 Corinthians. So this is his immediate plan, that in good faith, he says, I'm going to Macedonia first, and then I'll come to you, I'll stay with you, but right now I'm going to stay in Ephesus because of a great door effective open to me. There are many who oppose me. And so Paul basically decided to visit Corinth earlier than expected, and then they expected, and that caused a bit of a problem. But anyway, in the meantime, when Timothy comes, most likely Timothy is coming with a letter And so when he comes, see that he has nothing to fear while he's with you, because he's carrying on the work of the Lord just as I am. And no one then should treat him with contempt. Timothy seems to be a little more timid, more gentle, less forceful than Paul. And Paul is a person that you cannot really then take advantage and bully. But Timothy is probably a softer temperament, and he basically then protective over Timothy. So when Timothy comes and see that he has nothing to fear, nothing to be afraid, he's carrying God's work, the Lord as I am, you should not treat him with contempt. Then you send him on his way so that he may return to me then in peace, expecting me along with the brothers. Okay, so he's sending Timothy first to bring the letter to them and to do a little bit of work on his behalf and things like that. But when Timothy went, and Timothy met a very hostile reception, and probably that was the reason that Paul, and after he sort of called the situation in Ephesus didn't work out, and with the situation of Timothy being abruptly and being challenged, and he decided to go to Corinth straight away. Then in verse 12, now about our brother Apollos. Evidently, the Corinthians were also asking about Apollos. Okay, and this is an indication that Paul and Apollos has no real problems and interpersonal relationship with that. And but Apollos was aware of the situation in Corinth, and probably Apollos was aware that there is a little bit of a situation with Paul and the church. So even though Paul said, I strongly urge to go with you with the brothers, he was quite unwilling to go now. Oh, but he will go when he has the opportunity. So this, and Paul then urged Apollos, go visit Corinth. They like you there, and I urged you. Then, but Apollos, for that reason, then probably he feels that his situation, he going to Corinth, might aggravate the problem even more that they have with Paul. So he probably then with good reason say, no, I'm not going to go there. And but when the Lord, when the opportunity opens up, he will come, and he's quite unwilling to go. It's interesting that then Apollos, instead of writing to the church directly, then allow Paul and to send a message along. And probably this is to indicate that there is no real friction between Paul and Apollos, and it was basically in the minds and of the people in Corinth, and the problem is with them, and siding Apollos against Paul against Apollos, and but as far as Paul and Apollos concerned, that is no real problem. But be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be strong, be courageous, be strong. And probably some would indicate that this coming so close with verse 12 might be a little bit and kind of indirect and advised and against people who try to and create problems. So be on your guard and stand firm in the faith. Be courageous, be strong, and do everything in love. Okay, so very interesting. And be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be strong, be courageous, and do everything in love. Okay, and then the household of Stephanas, who were the first converts of Achaia. They have devoted themselves and to the service of the lost people. I urge you, brothers and sisters, submit to such people and everyone who joins the work and labors with it. Okay, I'm glad that when Stephanas, Fortunus, Achaeus arrived, they supplied what was lacking from you, for they refresh my spirit and yours too. Such men deserve recognition. So they were probably, Stephanus were the first converts, and very likely being the first converts, they were the older ones and more matured ones, and very naturally would, and unless they show themselves unworthy, then they would have been the leaders, but there's no such thing as Paul never called them as deacons or as leaders, but they are people who have devoted themselves to the Lord and service to the Lord's people. So I urge you to submit to such people and everyone who joins in the work and labors with them. So I was glad when Stephanus, Fortunus, Achaeus arrived. They've supplied what was lacking from you. Okay, probably one of the earliest and first converts, probably very close to Paul, and they refresh his spirits. And finally, he says that the churches in the province of Asia is again Asia Minor, where Ephesus, the 7 churches of Asia, those of you who've been to Turkey, the western part of Turkey, they send you greetings. Aquila, Priscilla greet you warmly. Aquila and Priscilla were in Corinth before, and so they're now in Ephesus, as does the church that meets at the house. All the brothers and sisters here send you greetings. Greet one another with a holy kiss. That is the traditional greeting. They kiss one another, as Mediterranean people do, the holy kiss. And then I, Paul, write this greeting in my own hand. So is indication that Paul did not write the letter himself. Then probably he detected the letter, and probably there are various reasons for Paul doing that. Maybe he has poor eyesight, he has some infirmity, that his writing is not that good, so he is professional person, most likely a secretary who writes that. But the greeting, okay, I write this greeting in my own hand, and the greeting, the last few words, and if anyone doesn't love, let that person be anathema and be cursed. And that is kind of a standard curse, and the person who doesn't love the Lord, let that person be accursed. Come, Lord. And this is the literal translate or called the translation of the this is probably in Aramaic, Maranatha, come, Lord. And the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you. My love to all of you in Christ Jesus. Amen. So final greetings to the church, to the Christians in Corinth. All right. Okay. Okay.